Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live. This is episode 114. I'm here with my guest, Jason Boehmig. Jason is the CEO and co-founder of Ironclad. You have heard of them. I know you have. And let me give you a little background on Jason first. He is the CEO of Ironclad currently, also an adjunct professor of law at Notre Dame. Uh, Ironclad is the intelligent contract management system for in-house legal teams. Prior to Ironclad, Mr. Boehmig, or Jason, was a corporate attorney in the startups and venture capital group at Silicon Valley firm Fenwick West, where he worked on early stage venture financings as well as complex corporate transactions for several well-known technology companies. Jason, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us and with our audience. You've got the legal background, and it sounds almost like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you were working to make your practice life a little bit easier when Ironclad came to be. Am I reading into that?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me here, Nick. Always fun to chat about this kind of stuff and love that this forum is out there. So really excited to be here and thanks for having me. Yeah, but
I
yeah, you're right.
appreciate it. I appreciate you being here. Yeah. So yeah,
Cool.
please tell me.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, the genesis of this sprung out of I knew my career, I wanted my career to exist at the intersection of law and technology. Was a practicing attorney and thought that that was always going to be law first, technology second. But turned out that the investigation of technology second led that to flipping around, and now it's technology first and law second. But the early genesis for Ironclad did come from that exposure to the problem space at the law firm.
And can you give us, this is again a founder journey type of
Yeah.
interview, and can you tell us sort of the origin story, where the genesis happened, and then how Ironclad came to be, and how you made the transition from the practice of law into being a legal technologist or creating a legal
Yeah.
tech startup?
Yeah. I mean, Kai Gogwilt's my co-founder. He's a incredibly accomplished software engineer and product person who came out of Palantir. And the interesting thing I think about Kai and myself both is that neither one of us sought out to be startup founders, but
Okay.
just wound our way to the problem. I'd say the real founding, there's a couple different founding moments if we look back, but the first one is probably the YOLO quit your corporate law job moment with like almost 200K of student loan debt. That's the one I look back on. I'm like, did I really do that? That was crazy. I can't believe that I did that. So honestly, there's not a whole, like that is to some extent a leap of faith. There were a couple things that led me to believe that that leap of faith was a good idea at the time, or like something I felt like I had to do. Um, but yeah, and then there's a couple of successive ones after that have felt like refounding the company. So one of those was meeting and like formalizing the partnership with Kai, which happened, I think 5 months after I quit my job or so.
Okay.
And then, another 5 months after that was our acceptance into Y Combinator 2015 batch, and another really founding moment of the company. And then we go from there. But those kind of three events, the quitting the job, linking up with the co-founder, and then doing the accelerator program were big ones.
Were big ones. So you did the kind of the opposite of what we get in law school, right? You did that where we get that risk averse or trained almost in that risk
Yeah.
averse nature, and you had all this law school debt, and for 5 months, you said before you and your co-founder sort of partnered up. Were you working on the problem during that time, or were you trying to develop an idea that you
Um,
wanted to create a product?
yeah. So the kind of serendipitous thing is Kai and I didn't know each other at the time. It took us 5 months to kind of find each other, but we started working on the same problem space,
Okay.
and we kind of were approaching it from opposite ends of the spectrum. I was a lawyer who knew the problem space really well, and it was a learning level software developer, and Kai was like an expert level software developer who was learning the problem space, but was very interested in it. And so we had both approached the problem through what our strengths were, which mine was kind of knowing the space, knowing other lawyers, and knowing other people that were also experiencing the problem. And so I actually had a few customers signed up and that were paying for a very rudimentary service. And Kai had like a uh, very well thought out and developed beginnings of a platform. And so we kind of sat together and said, look, I think we're building the same thing here. And you've got some progress that would be great to bring into the partnership. And I've got some progress that would be very complementary to bring in the partnership. And there's almost no duplication of work. So it was kind of a natural thing at that point.
That's very cool. And how did you guys discover each other?
Well, it's funny, like reflecting back on one of the reasons I love a program like this is like I've just always been interested in this intersection of law and technology. And back in the Bay Area in 2014 or so, there really wasn't that many people that were interested in this problem. And I honestly think the size was like 30 people. And everyone kind of knew each other. And so I had heard about Kai like through multiple people, like who were like, oh, hey, there's an engineer who's working on the same thing you're working on. And I was like, what? Who is this person? And then one day we both showed up at Codex at Stanford Law School, and there was like 15 people there, and we all went around the room and introduced ourselves. And one of the people there was Kai, and I was like, oh, it's Kai. I've heard about him from 3 people now. I should probably say hello after the session. And he had guests heard about me. So small world of people, 2014, interested in this area.
In law and technology.
Yeah.
That's for certain. And I mean, there's been a lot that has happened for Ironclad. It's been kind of rocket ship success since then, at least from the outside. From what I've seen, it's been a continuous growth and wonderful success. But I'm wondering, in those early couple of years, Y Combinator, a lot of our audience are legal tech startup founders who are still fleshing out ideas and who are still trying to. Can you go through a couple of maybe major obstacles that you experienced in those early stages, maybe even pre Y Combinator or post Y Combinator?
Yeah, I mean, one of them's like what market you're going to go after. And so this was like, I would say 2014 to 2017 was really I love that it looks like a rocket ship from the outside, but 2014 through 2017, which is really a long time, or what felt like a long time, there was a lot of skepticism about what we were working on. And it wasn't clear, especially to really anyone beyond me and Kai, that we should be doing what we were doing. And then after 2017, I think like more people started to realize, oh, this is actually a really good idea. And, the traction started to get hard to ignore. And definitely the trajectory has been really solid since then. But I think that early stage really required a lot of conviction around the problem space and the approach to the problem space. And rightly so, I think there was skepticism. The market we were selling into, like we took a pretty clear position from the beginning, like this is for lawyers and it's for lawyers that work at companies. And there hadn't been a good software business ever that had sold to lawyers that work at companies. Like there'd been some good ones that had sold to law firms and maybe like by vState standards, like not great, but like just okay. And there'd been some like consumer facing legal businesses that had done okay, but there really hadn't been a SaaS solution that had made it selling to in-house lawyers. Right. And so that was a very controversial and not widely recognized fruitful area to sell into. Now I think like people recognize that as good, but that shift there was pretty massive, and we had to defend that for a while and think about that for a while.
And so that was it, if I understood that correctly, it was the trying to say that the in-house departments, the market there is the good market that we want to be going after. Is that kind of one of those things that you struggled to prove to the market?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that if there is any takeaway in any of these things, because I always believe that, you got to find your own path if you're a startup founder, but it's actually good if it's not obviously a good space. So a signal that you might be doing the right thing is not everyone agrees it's the right thing. Because by the time everyone agrees it's the right thing, the ship has sailed. Like, I am not envious of anyone starting a business selling to in-house lawyers right now, because it's a crowded space and like you really have to distinguish yourself. Whereas, 2014, it was a little easier. A lot of lawyers would take a meeting with you because they're like, wait, you want to sell to me? What's going on here?
Interesting.
So
Interesting how that changes in a 7-year period.
yeah.
How about early success? Did you experience any early success that really stood out to you, that was like, okay, we knew we were on the right track, but boom, now like the little things that may invigorate you when you're down and out a little bit.
There's a couple of funny ones. So people really liked what we were building, which was really what kept us going in the early days of, even if, the Silicon Valley ecosystem was skeptical, customers really liked it. And that was, that's a DNA we probably got from Y Combinator, is like, if people build something people want, and people did want this thing. So I remember we had signed up, we were like a 5-person company working out of my apartment in San Francisco. And the beauty of the internet is like, not everyone knows how big your company is. Especially Ironclad sounds like a big company too. So we actually had some like really sizable customers. And one of them was a publicly traded company. And look, we had a great solution for them. And they just probably didn't, not that we hid the information, but they didn't know we were a 5-person company.
Right.
And
right.
I remember that we went down and I think like they just closed out their quarter as a publicly traded company on Ironclad, and it was a huge success. Like, they got executive level kudos, and it was a huge success for the company. So it was like, hey, let's do a happy hour. The sales team is coming by, and it was a sales and legal team happy hour, and we showed up with the whole company, which was like 5 people. And you could just see it dawn on them, like, oh my God, we just closed our quarter with a 5-person company.
Wow.
And at first they were kind of like, that's scary. And then they're like, that's kind of awesome. Like, you guys rock. And they're huge fans. And it
Still
was just kind of a
today?
fun, yeah. It's just kind of a fun story of like a success where we almost did something that most people wouldn't have thought was possible back then. But the ecosystem was so early that was a great solution with a 5-person company providing it.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like, that's kind of the whole, one of the overarching points of the show is that if you leverage technology, you can really accomplish quite a bit, even in the legal space. And you did it with a 5-person firm. I want to thank our guests who are our attendees here in the Zoom room. Lloyd, Mike, Min, and Natalie. If you have questions, please get those in over in the Facebook group. As well. If you've got questions, our guest tonight is Jason Boehmig, CEO of Ironclad. Please get your questions in. Usually takes the crowd a little time to warm up. Cami asks, Cami's in there. She says, how did you convince skeptical investors that it was a large market? And that's a great question.
Yeah, my view on the whole investor thing is, you aren't convincing anyone. You just are looking for like the needle in the haystack true believer that kind of wants to believe, as opposed to convincing. And I think there's this narrative among like founders that you're doing some magic and you're like, convincing these investors to invest in your company. And I think it's just, I view it as more like, it's great. We've gotten to know literally probably 1,000 times. And really what we're looking for is to just feed the right information to someone who wants to believe anyways. And I remember our first meeting with like Steve Laughlin at Excel, where it was a totally different vibe. It just different vibe than other investors we talked to. And we put up a slide that said something to the effect of, we have, for every legal department user we have 11 users outside of the legal department. He was like, yes, like I love this collaboration thesis. And, you know, what if we did this? And what if we did this? And so it wasn't a convincing, I mean, I guess technically that slide may have grabbed his attention, but we were just presenting information we thought was useful. And it's real information, it's factual, like we weren't making that up. But we picked the right facts that would allow believers to get excited as opposed to trying to convince. So we never did any market sizing convincing other than talking at a really high level about how many people have this problem.
And I'm imagining that there's 11 other collaborators who are using it. For every in-house lawyer who's using this, they're saying that there's more users in the company that it changes the contract value, right? Is that kind of what
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of what we're doing, is like saying contracts affect every function, not just the legal team. And the legal team is a force multiplier at the company. So if you are able to empower them, you actually empower the whole company.
Yeah, that's excellent. How were your sales early on? Did you have to show did you have pretty good traction? And you don't have to get anything proprietary or anything like that, but what kind of traction did you have to show when you were finally going out and raising money?
I'd say we've had pretty typical traction,
Okay.
you know, with some variance of like sometimes we decided to raise early or sometimes we've held off a little bit. But there's kind of rough ballparks. I mean, seed really these days it's just an idea for seed funding. Back then it was, I mean, we had customers at every stage. The beginning it was just people paying us $50 a month. Early customers, and then it moved into more corporations and enterprises. Well, we've always been pretty sales focused.
Mm-hmm.
I had paying customers before we had software, and I do think that traction is hard to ignore, even if
Yeah.
people don't think it's a good space. If you have dollars and contracts, that is worth a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, the typical milestones are $1 million ARR for a Series A, like, you know, 3 to 10 million for a Series B, and then it kind of starts to get a little bit more nebulous. But you know, we've been roughly in those ranges.
Excellent. I have to ask this question, I think, because I probably pass on this issue more than I should. But in the early
Yeah.
stages, uh, even as the CEO, were you making sales as well as were you out there, pounding the phones or pounding the emails, as well as anybody else in the firm who was trying to make sales in the early stages?
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely closed our first 25 customers. We did bring on a sales, someone focused on sales, maybe around 7 or 8 employees, if I recall correctly. Might have been earlier than that, but and the tremendous sales team. We've always had like a sales and product DNA.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still doing that on a weekly basis. So I think at least one founder needs to be doing sales. It tells you so much. It's not just like you get the voice of the customer, you get to know competitors, you get to know a lot about the market from talking to the customer. So I consider it kind of essential.
Yeah,
To
yeah. I
do.
think that, and I probably have overlooked that in previous discussions of how important that is for a CEO. Even though I'm aware that so many are doing it, and I think I forget to ask that. Mike Whalen asks, thinking about recent hires of. Well, Mike, you're getting to this before I can congratulate him on. I have to stop and congratulate you on your recent hire of Alex Sue, because he's just everybody in legal's favorite
Yeah.
TikToker, and so well done on that pickup.
Thank you. We're thrilled to be working with him.
Yeah, and so Mike does ask, thinking about your recent hires with Mary and Alex, How are you all thinking about community and its relationship with the product? So we've seen in the news recently that you've made a couple of high profile hires for our
Yeah.
space, and one is in charge of community, and then there's Alex, I think, head of community. So the both kind of community related hires. So how do you see that in relationship to the product?
Yeah, great question. And I think what we're doing is unique not just to legal, but actually to across software. I think we're going to see more companies creating a first-class community function. It's
Mhm.
kind of been something that's been bolted on previously, but we've always had it in our DNA. That was one of the first things I did as a founder. We brought on Vera, who's fantastic, and built out the initial foundations of community. And we've added on to that capability with Mary and Alex. And so we have loved investing in community. I think it's essential to the legal vertical in that lawyers are very networked, legal ops folks are very networked, and a lot of that knowledge kind of gets passed around word of mouth. And just kind of our thesis around community is we want to give to the community. We want to give, and if good stuff comes back to us, that's great, but we're not going to be transactional in nature around it. And that's really the thesis behind Alex and Mary. Mary's given so much to the community already with Clock and being the president there, and just the wonderful work that's been done. And Alex given so much in joy in the form of TikToks and just his wealth of knowledge. They're both just great people beyond that. So we want to kind of let them have their full-time job, be giving to the community. And we do think that good things will come back, but we're not going to be transactional about it.
Yeah, I like that.
And with respect to the product, I think that's something we're thinking through. It's a first-class function here, the community, but how that shows up in the product is very cutting edge and a great question.
Excellent. Yeah, Mike says he loves that philosophy, and I guess we all agree that legal technology needs more of that. I should say that we're live streaming into the legal tech community on Facebook, because that is what
Cool.
I created for
Love
trying
it.
to help build this community. So he and I are both in agreement that we need more of that. Natalie asks, she had a demo of Ironclad recently, which she loved. She's a lawyer out of Toronto. She was particularly impressed by the workflow-based pricing model. Can you provide more info on what led Ironclad to use workflow as the pricing metric rather than the standard legal tech pricing metric? And maybe you can explain the workflow pricing metrics to begin with for our listeners and audience who are maybe unfamiliar with your pricing model.
Yeah. So workflows on Ironclad is kind of like a contract type. You might have an NDA workflow, you might have a sales workflow, you might have a marketing workflow, you might have an HR workflow. And the bigger your company, the more contract types you're going to have, and the more you can add onto Ironclad. The real thesis behind that is we want to earn your business and not have to lock you into a big contract up front. And so earning your business lets companies start with a small number of workflows. In fact, many of our customers have just started with an NDA or just a sales agreement. And if you like that, you're going to buy more. So really the theory is we want to make it as easy as possible to get started with Ironclad, and check us out in a relatively low commitment way before you invest further in the product. We believe we want to win your business. That's in stark contrast to the way most of our industry operates, which is insane to me, which is huge multi-year lock-in contracts, and honestly a lot of failed promises there.
Mm-hmm.
So we are part of that's necessity in that so many people have been burned by these old legacy CLM implementations. We're trust us, this actually works, and you only have to buy one workflow to get started, and we'll go from there and we'll grow together. And if our customers are successful, we'll be successful.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to get too ahead of ourselves on that.
Yeah, I like that. Did that answer your question, Natalie? Let me know if you had a follow up on that. But that's excellent. Yeah, I don't want to pay for the 36 months and be locked in for those months. I do like that. Jason, in your experience, what have been in staff experiences? We've had, we've seen that some uh, big companies in the valley have been taking stances on staff related issues recently. Of course, we've had a pandemic and all this. What is your approach been to responding to the pandemic and maybe issues with staffing? How do you guys implement? Uh, how have you adjusted, first of all, to the pandemic? Did you guys go straight work from home, or were you already kind of a distributed workforce to begin with? How does that work?
So we were not distributed prior, and we have been and continues to be believers in in-person, that there is value to in-person collaboration,
Sure.
perhaps in an old school way. But hey, I'm a lawyer, so I can be old school about a couple things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've believed in person, and so we had a New York office and we had a San Francisco office, and everyone was in those offices 5 days a week pre-pandemic. The pandemic has caused us to rethink many things, and post-pandemic, well, one, we've acquired a company. We've acquired PackSafe, and they have an Indianapolis office, and we love investing in Indianapolis. So we have three, post-pandemic, we'll have three in-person locations, San Francisco, New York, and Indianapolis, all first-class hubs. And then we'll be adding a fourth hub, which is our remote hub. And we'll be both allowing gladiators, which is what we call people that work at Ironclad, that want to go to the remote hub to transfer into their remote hub. And that'll be an opportunity for new hires there. Not every hub has every role. Like we might say, hey, BDRs are junior, often fresh out of college, business development representatives. That's probably an in-person in a hub, because you're learning so much and you like listening to the person on the phone next to you. And but software engineers who have been doing this for 15 years and just need to put their headphones on and jam out, and that's their happy place, like you should totally be working from a cabin in Idaho, and just calling into the stuff you need to call into. So we're going to be flexible, and we're taking a hub model.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I ask you this, and not to put you on the spot, but we've seen some big explosions, and you can totally choose not to answer it, but I just wonder how we saw a Basecamp explosion, week or two ago, and Coinbase had taken some hard line on, no politics in the office. Maybe you can just, from a managerial perspective for other startup founders who are out there, how do you guys approach those things?
Yeah, I think every CEO is thinking through that right now. And I can tell you how we approach it, not that it's the right way, because I don't think there is one right way. I think it's what's right for the culture of the company. And there's a lot of approaches that work. And if there's a line between like politics and like banning politics, we try to actually stay in the middle, which is I've been talking about as just a human-centric approach of, we're not super political. I'm not going to address it in all hands, like everything that happens. But look, there's a lot of stuff that affects people that work at Ironclad, and we do want to be conscious of that, because our teammates are people. Right. And so there's been a wave of violence against Asian people. And that violence is like centered in communities where our offices are, and that affects a lot of people. And we've acknowledged that. We have a group that is educating themselves on matters like that, and it really comes from a grassroots place. But we don't ban it, because you can't ban that from someone's mind, and it's not really our place, and we try to recognize that. But we also don't go like, our mission is to power the world's contracts, and we believe that individuals interfacing with our community is how those issues ultimately get solved, and it is not the company's responsibility to affect some of the social change. It's individuals' responsibilities, and those individuals are welcome to work at Ironclad and speak with other people that work at Ironclad about them, but it's not the company's mission to change those things.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think it is a very difficult. I think a lot of businesses are thinking about how to address it, and I don't think there's an easy answer. But I
Yeah.
appreciate that neutral tone. Um, Veronica asks, how did you manage your finances as a founder when you were first getting started? And this is deep at the heart of a lot of founders I know.
Yeah.
Uh, did you initially, she goes on further, did you initially invest your own money to get your platform going? How did you attract talent with a startup budget? And I would add to that, Veronica, is like, how did you pay your bills? Because I know a lot of founders struggle with this.
Yeah, totally. So I did not have any money to invest. I was like scraping by as a corporate attorney even. I had, that's a longer story, but I basically took whatever job I could get at the law firm I wanted to work at.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all the student loan debt, and my dad's a minister and my mom's a kindergarten teacher. So there's no like other funds I could be tapping into. This is where I
The
look back.
parents were not bringing the deep pockets for you.
Yeah.
Right.
This is where I look back and I'm like, that was really like almost shockingly dumb. And the one advantage I had is I wasn't supporting anyone else. So like could take a risk and like, you know, eat ramen and hope that things worked out, and knew that I would be only affecting myself, which is a huge advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I quit my job. I ended up taking a pre-seed check pretty early on for I'm not going to share the exact financials of that check, but
Sure.
it was a low valuation, and you know that's because we were early on in the company life cycle, and that's a super profitable investment, and I absolutely love it because without that investment, we're not here today.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have afforded to work on the company, but we raised 200K.
Mm-hmm.
And 200K kept me and my co-founder going on like as minimal salary as, I don't actually remember what it was, but it was the eat ramen and survive salary. And like, you can't buy a drink at a bar ever because you're managing your money that closely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. And did we get that for you, Veronica? Let me know if, oh yeah, I'm sorry. She did have a second aspect to
Great.
that. Was how did you attract talent with a startup budget? That's always another concern, right? How do we bring in more people when we're on a budget?
So we have this great tool, Equity. And like, if you can communicate the value of the problem you're working on, Equity is a tremendous motivator for people. You don't have the ability to attract everyone with that. People have to be in a life circumstance where like they can go primarily in equity. We always paid people some cash component, but it was definitely like well below what our early teammates could make elsewhere. But we
Mm-hmm.
granted them large equity packages, which have turned into nice packages as we've gotten bigger, that I think everyone is super happy about. But yeah, that's the best tool, is being generous with equity in the early stages. And as an attorney, I often saw some early stage founders be stingy with equity. I've never been like, you know, was happy to and would do another pre-seed round at a low valuation, would make all of the early stage grants we made that were big grants again. I just think you're creating more people that win when you win.
Yeah, that's you did. Luckily, you had some experience with the startup finance and in transactional work, that you had some of that experience to say, I think that the better way to do this is not to be stingy. I imagine that
Yeah,
that helped you in that analysis.
absolutely. And the other form of capital that I had, which I got from working at the law firm, was some social capital, and that I knew some venture investors because I had like worked on legal financings. I didn't know a single person in the Bay Area when I moved here,
Mm-hmm.
but after 2 years in working at the law firm, like I knew some VCs, and they knew who I was, and they knew I probably wasn't gonna like take the money and go to Argentina or something.
Right.
So that was a huge form of currency that might not have been the form of dollars.
Right. Well, that's good note. And Natalie, and we're about 35 minutes in, folks. I don't want to keep Jason all night. He's a busy man. So if you've got one or two more questions, please get those in. And Natalie asks her second question. At your
Great.
event last month, you announced acquisition of PactSafe, and she says, congratulations on that. Can you elaborate more in your thesis in relation to integrations, acquisitions, in Ironclad's mission to empower in-house legal teams?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the question. That's a great one. I mean, we're pretty thrilled about the PactSafe acquisition. It's a great team over there. It's one of the only other companies I've ever heard of that has a stellar reputation in the legal operations field and among people who know PactSafe and know that it's a great group of people and it's a great, very innovative and differentiated product. So we were thrilled to get the chance to work with that team. And the real thesis with respect to integrations, maybe I'll tackle acquisitions second.
Sure.
With integrations is we want to power every type of contract across every industry. And PactSafe is powering a really interesting type of contract that is only growing more and more ubiquitous, which is basically online contracts. I mean, we know terms of service, of course, but there's so many contracts that exist in other applications interfaces now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's compliance behind those, there's management, there's so many different things that need to happen. And PactSafe is really the only comprehensive solution in the market for that problem. So we just viewed that as an extension of our mission, as you said, to empower in-house legal teams to bring their business contracts into the digital age. And wherever we find such an opportunity, we will, we'll seek to be the company that is powering those contracts and helping empower legal teams. We're not like actively looking for acquisitions or anything like that, but I do think that the market will continue to consolidate. Like one thing I think is difficult as a buyer of legal technology is, and might not be as apparent to buyers, like there's a lot of small companies that are going to get acquired. I think we've seen the last week 2 smaller CLM players that got acquired. And, it's just risky, I think, to go with some of the smaller folks who you don't know where you're ultimately putting your contract data and where it's going to wind up. So we may be part of that consolidation, but I think the trend will continue to play out, and we'll always keep our eye on the market.
Well, and it became sort of a oversaturation of the market, I think. At a certain point, and I have turned down several smaller players to be guests on the show because there were so many smaller players, Jason, I couldn't bring them on and differentiate for the audience what they did as compared to somebody else. That I just and I apologize that I actually had told them, those who have reached out, that I'm not doing a lot of contracts related content right now. And I had told them that you would be I told somebody that you would be coming on the show, but that was kind of the limitation on that in the startup space, because it had become so competitive and hard to curate an appropriate discussion on that and differentiate. And did Natalie, did we discuss the acquisitions aspect of that? Did we touch on that, or did we just talk integrations? Yes, we got it. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you're here to co-host for me, Natalie.
Thank
you. Mike has another question over here. He says, any insight on the future of the in-house space or legal ops? Do you see change in how we educate law students or others who want to come into the in-house legal ops space?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think it's one of the things I think is very exciting about legal operations is we've had this gate around the legal profession for so long. This kind of an arbitrary gate, like you've passed the bar exam, but that doesn't really have anything to do with the business of law and the business of law at an in-house legal department. It might have something to do with the technicalities of a contract negotiation or a litigation proceeding, but in-house departments operate as a business unit, and really the legal expertise is probably a minority, small fraction of what the in-house department actually does on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things I'm excited about with legal ops is it really opens up to business people the ability to have an impact on what I think is one of the most important teams at the company. The legal team works with every other team. It's kind of like the rate limiter of the entire company. And if you can improve how the legal department functions, you can improve the functioning of the entire company. And it's just great to have that accessible to not just lawyers, but business people. So I'm really excited about the rise of that profession. And I know Mary has a lot to say about that too. That Clock has been an incredible driving force in bringing that forward. Your second part of that was about the education of legal professionals, and
of law students or bringing others who want to come into
of
legal.
law students. Yeah, and I do think that we've tried to do this at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has been very forward, one of a small group of law schools that have been very forward thinking and getting a little bit more practical about legal education, which I think is a great thing. I certainly enjoy learning about the intricacies of constitutional law, but I have not used my common law knowledge for like 1 second in my actual practice.
Right.
And
but we're a lot of fun. But we're a lot of fun at parties with that basic knowledge from 1 year of law school.
Exactly. There's like once every 18 months you get to be able to drop something in a cocktail party that sounds good. But
let me tell you what.
Strict scrutiny.
Yeah, that's right.
That's all I got. But I really think like law schools need to get a little more practical. I actually like the some of the legal education isn't the most practical and it's theoretical. That's cool. But it shouldn't be all theoretical and practical. All theoretical. It should be practical as well. And the operations of a legal department is about as practical as you can get. And so I do think that we should be training law students. There should be more courses about technology, about the business of law. And I think that's coming slowly but surely. Like when we started this class at Notre Dame it's first called Law 2.0, and it was really just a survey of legal technology and different practice areas affected by it. I think there were 2 schools in the country doing it. Now I saw there's at least 10 that have some sort of curriculum around technology and more practical education. So I think it's coming, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and Mike kind of follows up with a statement that, and as I recall too, that we didn't see or ever read an actual contract in contracts class.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. Yeah. It really is. And you're right. The legal department or in-house legal departments really is business legal, right? It's the business of law happening there, and like it'd be great if we'd seen a contract. I didn't get that until I was clerking.
Yeah.
Okay, Jason, I don't want to keep you any longer than I already have. I appreciate you giving us this just great experience and congratulations on your ever-growing success. I've loved following the company. And I hope maybe you could come back in 6 months or a year and share
I'd love to.
more experience with us.
Consider me down anytime. Always love this stuff. Appreciate you hosting. Love the questions. And yeah, just thanks for being here, everyone.
Yeah, my pleasure. And can you tell everybody how to get in touch with you? I imagine you don't want to give out your email address, but maybe there's a place for them if they want to connect or.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, please.
I'm on LinkedIn, so find me on LinkedIn. Our website's great too. If you want to learn more about Ironclad, you can speak with somebody very quickly there via chat or like submitting stuff on the website. So. And one of the cool things is we're, approaching 300 folks at the company, which is such a fun size because you're never more than one email away and anyone can loop me into any conversation. So feel free to give someone an excuse to have a follow-up.
Yeah, great. And the website, everybody, is ironcladapp.com. That's ironcladapp.com. So make sure to check that out. And Jason is active on LinkedIn. It's how I initially reached out to him about coming on the show.
And I'm going to have to get Alex to get me on a TikTok somewhere. So
you're going to have to. Yeah, I expect to see that soon.
We'll get the collab.
I should have had him record us doing this so that he could make some funny video out of it. Jason, thanks so much. Don't disappear when we stop recording. Thank you, Cammie, Mike. Veronica, Natalie, Min, Lloyd, thank you all for being here and asking your questions. And we will see you, I believe we're on next week. So stay tuned. Have a good evening.